Welcome back, wordsmiths and story seekers. I am your host, Daniel Willcocks, broadcasting from the shadowy halls of Devil's Rock HQ. And I am excited today to bring you a brand new episode, a different episode to what I normally share. So I normally do one-on-one interviews, I normally share a bit behind the scenes. Today, I've got a group of authors who I'm very excited to introduce to you guys. They are the authors behind, or authors included, in the Eerie River Publishing anthology Earth Bleeds at Night. And today I've got joining me Chris O'Halloran, M. Starr, and Richard Thomas. Now, this is a very, very fun conversation for me because an anthology is, for those who don't know, a book full of short stories. These are short story writers who are doing very, very well, doing very, very amazing in their area, in their craft. And often one of the questions I get asked a lot about is there any value in writing short stories? What's the point in writing short stories versus, say, a novel? And how does that world work? So in this interview, I speak to each of the authors themselves. I talk about their inspiration and why they wrote the stories that they wrote for this particular anthology. I speak about their history in writing short stories. I go into those questions that I've just mentioned. So it's a very, very fun interview. And it's one of those that I recorded a while ago. I recorded early this year. I want to say sort of April, maybe 2025, May 2025. And so I'm really, really excited to finally be at the point where I can bring this to you. And going back to revisit this conversation, to edit into this podcast, it's been a really nice reminder. It was such a fun conversation, and these are three amazing individuals in their own rights. Chris O'Halloran has since published Pushing Daisy, which is his debut novel, which he speaks about a bit in this episode. Richard Thomas is going from strength to strength. M. Starr is doing amazing things. So I am very, very excited to bring you this episode. So I'm going to kind of leave it there and not say anything else because I just kind of want to get to the meat. The last thing that I will say is just as a reminder for anyone who wants to come into my community for the Writers' Chair for Devil's Rock Publishing, speak to myself, meet other horror writers, meet other horror authors, and just, freak out about what this is about the craft, about everything to do with the horror of the dark side, then all you got to do is go over to devilsrockbooks.com/podcast and you can jump straight into our Discord. So there you go. Without any further ado, I'm going to leave it over to Dan, Chris, M, and Richard. Enjoy. Hey, it's me, Daniel Willcocks, and joining me this week in the Other Stories Writer Chair, I've got Christopher O'Halloran, M. Starr, and Richard Thomas, and possibly Mark Taus, but we'll go into that if the occasion happens. And today's a bit of a different one because normally I do these one-on-one podcasts and I interview different people, but as you guys know, I have a group here, and this group is part of a brand new anthology that has been published by Eerie River Publishing, and the anthology is The Earth Bleeds at Night. And you guys have all written some fantastic stories, and I dived into those earlier and really enjoyed them, but we'll get into those specifics in a minute. What I will do, just to set the tone for the kind of stories and the kind of conversation that we'll have, is read a little bit, well, the full blurb of what's going on in this book. So, delve into the abyss with The Earth Bleeds at Night, an anthology that plunges you into the heart of darkness and implores you to ask, what terrors are capable of making the very earth bleed? Featuring a haunting lineup of award-winning authors, alongside the most promising new talents in horror fiction, these stories promise to unveil terrors that will haunt your dreams. From the eerie whispers of literary horror to the blood-curdling screams of campfire tales, each narrative will drag you deeper into the void. Open this book if you dare. Let the earth bleed. And this is featuring stories from Jonathan Louis Duckworth, M. Adusa, David Jack Fletcher, C.M. Forrest, Philip Fracassi, Maxwell the First Gold, Maxwell I Gold, Laurel Hightower, Patrick Hurley, I Zhang, Jenny Kiefer, Joe Cock, Dexter McLeod, Christy Nogle, Christopher O'Halloran, M. Starr, Richard Thomas, S.J. Townend, Mark Taus, and Ali Wilkes. And to begin this conversation, I'm going to do a bit of well, I will ask you actually to go around and just introduce yourself nice and briefly so that people get a little bit of a colour who you are. Starting with, no particular order, Christopher. Would you like to introduce yourself and say a little bit about your writing background?
Yeah, sure. I've been writing for a while. I actually, in my grade 12 graduation, I got the award most likely to be YouTube famous because I used to do short, comedy skits on YouTube with my friends and everything. So that's kind of where I started, and then, from there, I just, I from like the age of 12, I've been reading Stephen King, way earlier than I probably should have. Probably a similar story to a lot of us. And I just decided, it's the art form that you can really control the most. Like If you're making a movie, if you're making a skit, you gotta rely on so many other factors, from people to weather to location, equipment. But to write, you just need, paper and a pencil and whatever, you just your mind. And so that's what drew me to writing.
Ah, the control. And also, just because
Yes.
this can be audio only, you have a bunch of rosettes and ribbons behind you. Are any of those YouTube awards?
I wish. No, those are all my wife, she rides horses, so
Oh,
she's
amazing.
got some yeah, she's got some dressage awards. Yeah.
Oh,
I'm
beautiful.
very
Well,
proud of her. Yeah.
shout out to your wife as well. That's amazing. Um,
Yeah.
and so let's jump a little bit into your story. So your story was Water Drops on the Hearthstone. Tell us a little bit about the premise of that story and kind of why you felt that it linked into this theme of a earth bleeding at night.
This story was actually written maybe a couple years ago. This story, surprising to me, is one of my most rejected stories, actually. I think I have upwards of 25 rejections on this one story. And it's basically the tale of this mother who wasn't really equipped to be a mother emotionally. So it's her dealing with the fallout of the loss of her estranged child and trying to come to terms with that, trying to find answers both within herself, find that catharsis within herself, and try to forgive herself for the way that she has, abandoned her child in a sense. It is unfortunately informed by some personal stories. Not from myself, but from loved ones ja- and and their troubles with, their parents and everything. Not only that, but also the struggles of parenthood. Me and my wife, we have two young boys, and the stress that comes from that is really it's something palpable. And that's just something that I really wanted to represent in a sense that is realistic, not villainized, not vilified. That's just, represents the struggles of being a human in a sense.
Yeah, and speaking for myself in my reading experience, that definitely comes across as a kind of honesty and vulnerability to almost accepting that you're not what other people think you should be. And there's some really sort of like nice tones in there about, the ducks in the river and all these sort of real touches of. I feel like a story like this can only be written by a parent because you have those really kind of emotional links into the story as well.
Right. And it's not, for better or for worse, what people expect you to be. Even
Mm.
if you are someone who's cold and shut off, like there's often a reason for that. There's often a reason for, what makes, uh, for lack of a better term, an asshole. Like what led you to that point? And
Yeah.
and I always think that that is an interesting path to follow, an interesting path to explore, because it's not easy being a good person. It's not. It is a choice that you have to make. And if you don't make it, why are you not making that choice?
Mm. And there's a real sort of I guess honesty is the key word in this, but like it feels very real in the dialogue and the exchanges that they have. There's like a moment at the funeral where the pinky finger of the female protagonist sort of brushes the ex-partner's hand and the hand moves away. There's all these kind of like little nuances that really make you understand and but you don't fully feel sorry for her, but you kind of just get it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I'm glad that came through. Yeah. I always try to put that realistic touch in it, like how do you show this relationship between these two people without, explicitly defining it?
Yeah, and I will say I won't ruin what the opening visual is, but there's a really nice opening visual sort of in the cupboard or closet, I should say, as things are dripping that really kind of pull you into the story, which I personally appreciated from a bit of a grotesque side of things. What was it about, the theme of the Earth bleeds at midnight? I always say midnight at night that kind of made you feel like this is a story that would fit that theme.
So there are a lot of themes of nature. That is the one area where this woman and her daughter really connected at this waterfall. So I thought, the earth bleeds at night. Um, it invokes a lot of sorrow to me. It invokes, a lot of emotion coming up from the earth. Like the cracks that form and the pain that kind of erupts. And what better way to explore that than with a death?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely perfect. We will jump over to M and potentially
Oh,
come back to you, Christopher. M, hello. Please introduce
hello.
yourself and let us know a little bit about your story as well.
Okay, hello. I'm Em, everybody, and I'm hailing from Melbourne, Australia. I'm an emerging writer. That's what I'm classed as, although I've been writing my whole life. I was that kid that scared everyone in primary school with stories of the scary man who lived in the tree outside. So, I've always been drawn to writing, always been drawn to horror, but a couple of years ago, I started writing professionally and had I just had my 12th short story published, so it's gone pretty well. Working on my debut novel at the moment, which is a surf horror, supernatural surf horror set in 1990s Australia. And
That
yeah,
sounds
I've got a few
amazing.
other.
I don't think I've ever read surf horror.
Oh, well, I don't surf, so it's been interesting. But my eldest daughter is married to a surfer, so I know the surf culture very well. But yeah, and I've got a lot of brains to pick on that one. So yeah, with regards to my story in The Earth Bleeds at Night, I'd been wanting to write a story for a while. Originally, this story started as a slasher story where it was going to be sort of like, typical outback slasher, burying bodies. And then I wanted to sort of have him harvest some sort of stone or reward that he was then making a living off and having it, sort of a cyclic nature there. And then I don't tend to write very many slasher stories, so I sort of moved away from that concept really quickly when the open call came out for The Earth Bleeds at Night, and I really started to apply that concept of harvesting from the earth. And in Queensland, there's a place called Mount Tamborine, and you can fossick for thunder eggs there, which are basically little balls of lava that have crystallized minerals inside them. And depending on what minerals flowing through the lava at the time that it solidifies, you get, opal or quartz or Miriam jasper. And I found that really fascinating. So I used that concept and then really sort of at the time I was influenced a lot by I don't know if you know the Addams Family. They have a film called not the Addams Family, like not those guys. But they're a family of filmmakers, mother, father, and their two daughters. And they have a film called Hellbender, and it really focuses on how one generation consumes the next. And
Mm.
that's sort of what inspired this idea of, well, I can't give too many spoilers. I don't know how many spoilers can I give here?
As many as you're comfortable giving without ruining the story.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll give it. And so basically, I wanted to have a look at how, um, I guess, the parallel between the way nature eats itself. So they have a saying in that movie, and um, it's spring eats fall. Oh, sorry, winter eats. No, spring eats winter, winter eats fall, fall eats summer, and summer eats spring.
Yeah,
I think that's right.
I think that checks.
Yeah, and so I really love that. And so I had this idea that generationally, as human beings, we sort of do the same thing. One generation moves on, the next one picks up the where the last one left off, and there's this whole sort of cyclic nature as human beings. And I guess I wanted to explore that connection that we have with nature. And yeah, and that's sort of how I got my Dolly Rocks story.
In a very, very effective manner. I will say that it's been a while since I've read a story and I've had to Google so many terms. And there's some really powerful visuals of, the tree and the roots and everything else. And I think, again, as a reader, it very much captured the essence of what you're going, that cyclical nature and that kind of, this is a forever story. And oh, I can't say that because that ruins it. So I'll
That's all
probably
right. So I probably just ruined it as well. Don't worry.
Well, I think mine was specifically alluding to the ending, and I don't want to.
Oh,
I want
right.
to leave that for people. But was this story written specifically for this anthology, or was this one that you did previously and kind of attached to the theme?
Well, I had the idea marinating for a little while, but then everything sort of fell into place when the open call came out for this one, and I thought, okay, this will fit because we have bloodwood trees down here,
Mm,
and I just thought with bloodwood trees, if you do damage the roots or the tree at all, it oozes a red sap that looks like blood, and I thought, well, that's perfect.
yeah.
And so, because bloodwood trees are on Mount Tamborine and you've got the thunder eggs, I thought, okay, well, this is all sort of coming together now for me. And I had to do a lot of research as well on the thunder eggs because it's a it's such a huge topic. Like it was a rabbit hole. I just fell down and couldn't get out of it. And but it's great. I mean, I tend to do that a lot with my writing. I like to take a topic or a subject that I may or may not know a lot about and then really research the hell out of it and then apply my own experiences in life to sort of bring myself to that story or elements of, myself. So yeah, I'm glad. I want you to get out there and Google some things. That's cool. We
Oh,
should
so much.
always be learning and expanding our knowledge, I reckon. So
This is it. And one of the wonderful things about Kindle, you can just highlight the word and it gives you what it means. So yay
I
for
did not
Amazon, pat on
know
the
that.
back. Yeah,
I didn't know that.
yeah.
Thank
You
you for
could.
the trick.
I think sometimes you have to install like the dictionary, but it gives you. But if you just long press and hold the word, it pops up with the meaning,
Yeah. Oh, cool. Did
which
not
is
know that.
there you go.
Hey, we're all learning.
And so, was there any particular influence for this kind of story, or was it very much just a whim as you were going through and putting it together?
Uh, yeah, well, as I was saying before, the Addams Family,
Hmm.
they also do the soundtrack to that movie. They do the cinematography, the acting, they're incredible. And so I was listening to the soundtrack while I was writing this
Nice.
story, and so I think that really influenced the tone and the mood of the story. And I always try and bring a bit of an Australian influence into my stories anyway. I understand that for us, we're just Aussies. We're pretty humble people, and we don't really think that anyone's that interested in our culture. But I'm finding that the more I lean into just the everyday isms of being an Australian, the more it's like a rich vein that I'm tapping into. So yeah, I really sort of tried to bring that influence into it. I know Mount Tamborine really, really well. My daughter just got married there a couple of years ago, so. And I was actually staying at the place where you fossick for the thunder eggs, and that's where it's sort of, I sort of hold these little things in my mind and don't even know they're in there, and so suddenly they'll just pop up. So I think that's sort of how that came about.
See, I didn't even know what fossick meant.
Mhm.
I've learned so much from reading your story. Thank you.
Thank you.
And let's go to you for a little bit, Richard, if that's okay. If you're happy
Sure.
to introduce yourself and then tell us a little bit about your story.
Awesome. My name's Richard Thomas. I've been writing for about 15 years. Um, I have 4 novels, 4 short story collections. I've edited 5 anthologies. I ran a magazine, Gamut, for 2 years, and a publishing house, Dark House Press, for a couple of years, 3 years. About 135 stories published. I'm a Bram Stoker finalist twice, Shirley Jackson finalist, and a Thriller Award finalist. So I am now working as a full-time writer, editor, and teacher, and sometimes publisher. So I love writing. I love writing short stories. I love writing the long form. For this story, and I'm in Chicago, Illinois.
Mm.
When they invited me to be part of this anthology, I started thinking about like what I wanted to do. What have I written recently? What's something different? Because I don't want to regurgitate my own work. And I've been thinking for a long time about a story. Adam Neville wrote a story called Hippocampus. I don't know if you guys have read it. It was in one of the best, I think it was best horror of the year a couple of years ago. And it was a story I taught in my workshops that the first time I read it, I was like, I did not like it at all. I felt like nothing was happening. The whole thing's set on like a ship that's kind of adrift in the ocean. It's just this very quiet story, a camera tracking through the ship. And you start to slowly find the aftermath of violence. It builds up to a moment at the end where you have this big reveal. I just thought it was dull. Then I went back and I was picking one of the last stories for my workshops for that year. I looked on Amazon to see like, what's the one story people are talking about that I haven't picked already? So I was having trouble picking the last one, and everybody was talking about Adam's story, and I'm like, okay, crap. I guess I got to go back and reread it. And I went back and reread it, and I thought this is brilliant. It's so quiet. It's basically it's like the silence after the gunshot. It's the echo of something bad that's happened, the tension of you just missing something really violent. And there's some remnants of things and some evidence, but that was part of what inspired this story. I'm a big fan of his work. It's written, my story Supplication is written, it's basically from the point of view of a place. And so I'd also been thinking, I tend to write first person. I published like 135 stories. I'd say probably 33 of them are first person. I write third now and then. I wrote some third when I was in my MFA program when I got my master's degree, but third always feels very cold and distant to me. And this one even slides into second a little bit, I think. I think it might slide in, say, you here or there. But the whole idea was, coming back to the idea of the earth bleeds at night, was of, again, coming back to nature and the planet. And, as we go through all this stuff with climate change and all the insanity in the world, I keep thinking to myself, well, the planet's going to be fine. We may not be, human beings may be erased, but whatever happens, there's going to be a great purging at some point, probably. The earth is going to survive. But in the meantime, I feel like nature and the earth is starting to push back and rebel against the intrusions of man, whether it's pollution or fracking or the ocean or whatever, all the different ways that we do horrible things. And so the whole story is really set from this place. And I tend to write a lot of Midwestern point of views. So it's based kind of on this forest preserve down the road from me where I used to go walking and stuff, where I try to go walking in. It's just the idea of a place that's kind of tainted, that you can't really find it unless like you're allowed to find it. And it's all about the space. And there's all this weird stuff that's happening in the woods, and this giant cairn of bones, and all leading up to some kind of an uprising from any animal or creature or beast within range of this space. And at the end, there's kind of to get the earth bleed, just kind of a crack in the earth, a kind of a bubbling up of lava that starts seeping out. And you just get a sense of kind of nature pushing back against man. You see like the orca whales and stuff. There's a lot of stuff happening out there, but when you don't live in harmony, right, you risk a rebellion, a pushback, against whatever you're doing that's oppressing or destroying, right? And so the whole weird part of the story was that there's no I, there's no character. The character is the place. And so that was a tricky thing. The story is just a touch over 2,000 words because it was really hard. I write fantasy, sci-fi, horror, thrillers. I write a lot of dark stuff, new weird. I'm a maximalist writer. And so I like heavy setting, density, sensory detail. But
I've never heard
really,
that term before. I love that.
What?
Maximalist writer.
Yeah, maximalist. I would consider like Cormac McCarthy to be a maximalist. People who
Gotcha.
are really dense. And so it's just really like everything in there. You're talking about the research you did. I had to do a lot of research on like what kind of plants and animals live in this area, and I wanted to go deep down. I'm doing like the whole rule of three. So every time I would mention a bush, it'd be a bush and a plant and a tree. And I'm trying to find weird plants that are native to like Illinois and what kind of animals. And I try to push out into some weird animals that are almost like urban legends and stuff. And so the whole thing's supposed to be really kind of creepy and unsettling, but also kind of beautiful and haunting at the same time. So I liked my work a lot, the kind of intersection between good and bad, between light and dark, the kind of yin yang of how that all works together. So I mean, the word things that are wondrous, that's a lot of the new weird is kind of uncanny. The word awful just means full of awe. And so that could be good or bad. And so that's part of what kind of seeps into my work. So my story Supplication it's a shorter one, but I'm hoping that even though it's only 2,000 words, that it's an intense experience. I like to write immersive stuff that hopefully it pulls you in. And then next thing you know, you look up and it's over and you're like, ooh, that was a trip. That's my hope.
I would say from, again, like the reader experience from when I read through it, and I mean this in like the best way, it definitely felt experimental. It felt dense. It had sort of hints of a little bit like when you're trying to read the Silmarillion, you've got so much of that like detail and that lore. And I as I was reading it, I could imagine kind of the cinematography, just that kind of like slow pan into the place, going through all the different things. So I think from what you said, that was the desired effects that carried forward successfully.
Yeah, I try to write cinematically because that's how I see it. I don't know, Chris and Em, when you write, but when I write, it's like when it's really working, when everything's working, and you can channel the voice. It's like it's the protagonist and it's the camera and then it's me and it's like the audience. Like we're all seeing the same thing. And so this story especially was really pulling you in with the camera and pulling you into the woods and pulling you down a path to these different locations, slowly, and trying maximum effect and trying to be as creepy and unsettling while also really trying to speak to the kind of the heart of the story, which I think speaks to the, hopefully if I did my job right, to kind of the theme of the anthology.
Perfect. And so I will open the floor a little bit for the next question because, this is a short story anthology, and yet it's a very, very big, high concept. The Earth Bleeds at Night has so many possibilities. And even just, speaking to you three, all of your stories are so different. They've taken their own different lenses and there's so much possibility. And one of the questions I love asking writers in general is like, what is it about the short story format that you like? And what do you feel like you get out of experimenting with this kind of limited capacity of writing down your words? And whoever wants to take that, feel free.
This is kind of a pragmatic answer, I think, but I like that it's short. I like that it's something that you can start and finish relatively quickly. I mean, depending on who you are. I know I have this friend, Jolie Tumajan, who spends like a year working on one short story, but when she puts it out, it's like the most amazing thing you'll ever see, you'll ever read. That's not really what I'm going for. I'm just kind of, I like the the Black Mirror kind of stuff, like the
Mm.
Twilight Zone. You can kind of get in, get out real quick, and as an artist, that's very rewarding. And as someone with ADHD, that's
Yeah.
very satisfying to my brain. I do
Instant
primarily.
gratification.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. I do consider myself more of a novelist. I do love novels. I love long novels like Stephen King, one of my favorites. Tananarive Due, like
Mm.
she
Mm.
spends a lot of time, drawing you in. But as an artist, being able to complete something that quickly, for me is really satisfying.
100%. I'll jump in on that. That's exactly why I love the short form as well. Um, I even now while I'm writing my novel, I find that, I mean, writing is it's a lonely job. It's unless you're co-writing with somebody, which I don't do. There's so much introspection, there's so much time on your own. And when you're writing the long form, I'm finding that can sometimes, you know, I don't know. Maybe it's my need to prove that I'm achieving or doing something. Like, hey, with a novel, I don't get that until way down the track. But with short stories, you can show your productivity. You can purge those ideas quickly and get that sort of satisfaction. Usually, a short story will take me probably about a week I'll spend on a short story, but the idea will have usually been marinating in my head for a very long time. I've usually got about, I don't know, 10 to 15 ideas on the boil at the one time. So when I get to purge that out, it's a really cathartic sort of experience. And while I'm writing, I'm obsessed with it. It's all I can think about. I'm eating and thinking about what my character would be thinking if they were eating this, and hearing songs and what would my character be thinking if, my protagonist be thinking if they were listening to this song. But once the short story is done, I just sort of, you know, let it go, let it blow away on the wind and move on to the next. And so I think that's something that really attracts me to short form, is just that ability to process those ideas and get them out there so quickly. It's just really satisfying as a writer.
Yeah, right on. Um, I have similar thoughts. I think I think all different lengths have value, whether it's flash fiction or short stories or novelettes or novellas or novels. I've written all of them. They all have different appeal and different reasons that I do them. Um, I mean, I'm not precious with my work either. You're talking about the time where we think and research. My last novel, Incarnate, came out last September. This Arctic horror senior book, and I wrote like 52,000 words in 2 weeks for the gap between
Wow.
classes. But I've been
Wow.
doing research and watching movies and reading books and stories for 2 years because I
Yeah.
just couldn't. I had to do so much research, I hired a guy who's an Arctic advisor, so I get all the native stuff right and all the Arctic stuff right. And when I finally sat down to write, it just like came gushing out of me, right?
Yeah.
When everything's working, I think the philosopher Deleuze talks about a body without organs. Everything kind of fades away. You don't hear anything. You don't have to go to the bathroom. You're not hearing, you're in that. You're in it, right?
Yeah.
That's when I can really tell that when it's working because it's just flowing out, right? Stephen King talks about like a short story being like a stolen kiss in an alleyway, and a novel being like a marriage. I see it a little
I
differently.
love
I
it.
definitely think a novel is a marriage because you spend time with it, and whether you read a book in a couple weeks or a month or 3 months, that's a long relationship. It's a very writing in general is a very intimate thing we do as writing with our readers, and the vulnerability, the openness between us back and forth, that you want to have trust and you want to be vulnerable and open up. So I agree with the novel being like a marriage. I see really flash fiction as being more like a stolen kiss in an alley, and maybe a short story being like a fling or a short
Summer
relation.
romance.
Yeah, exactly. But there's so many reasons to write short stories. To connect with people, to be a part of like this anthology we're in. I get to meet you guys and get to know you, read your work. Like that's super cool. Get to know editors, get your work out there, get your name out there, get discovered, have people read your stuff. I've been working with like Michael Bailey, and Joe Meinhardt and Doug Morano for a long time, many years, many anthologies that have been nominated and won awards. And there's a relationship with that. And you build up your brand, you get your work out there. People can come in and they can take a bite. They can have a little relationship with you, right? They don't have to commit to the whole book. I think you can also really experiment. Like this story, Supplication. It's definitely a weird little story, but it felt different like than the last story I wrote, which was like a puritanical witch horror story, that was a little more conventional. But for this anthology, this is what I wanted to do. And but you can write different genres. I mean, I write fantasy, sci-fi, horror, thrillers, neo-noir, Southern Gothic, literary, and everything, all the different umbrellas underneath all those things, right? In fact, like I just got a story into Lightspeed magazine last year, which I've been trying to get into for 15 years, and they're like one of the top sci-fi markets out there. And
Congratulations!
To have John Joseph Adams say yes to a story, the same guy that not only edits Lightspeed but edits Nightmare and also edits like the best American science fiction and fantasy of the year, right? That meant a lot to me. But that allows me to experiment, to try writing a werewolf story, to try writing first person, third person, past, present, second person, weird formats, all these different things. Like you really get to explore and play. I came up writing a lot of kind of neo-noir gritty realism, and then realized that outside of like horror, which has a lot of realism, there weren't a lot of magazines for it. You had like Ellery Queen and like Hitchcock's, and like that's it. But once you go into the speculative umbrella of fantasy, sci-fi, and horror, and all the different subsets and subgenres, that really opens it up. So it's also, Christopher said, pragmatic. I would like, when you have two markets over here and you have 40 over here that have pro pay, like it makes more sense to open up to the places where you have more room. So I think,
yeah, definitely.
I write about somewhere between 4 and 6 short stories a year. Like I said, I'm not particularly precious, whether it's inviting in or I see a cool open call or something I want to be a part of. I have my white whales. I still haven't gotten in a Nightmare or The Dark or fantasy and science fiction or Clark's World. I have all these places I'm still trying to get in. I think it allows you to experiment and play. And like you said, it's a quicker thing. I wrote my last novel, like I said, 52,000 words, the bulk of it in 2 weeks, and I finished it up. It ended up being 78. But like when I write a short story, I'm kind of feast or famine. It's either all or nothing. So when I sit down to write, I could write 6,000 words in a day. I could write 5,000 words in a day, where I just crap out the lump and get the rough draft down. And I come back to it and cycle through the scenes. And then I go again and again. I try and put it aside, and I try and forget it a little bit. And I have a deadline at midnight. I'll come back, read it again. I'm going like, this is my editing process. What I teach my students is chainsaw to hatchet to chef knife to scalpel. Like you go outside in.
Oh, nice.
Big moves, and then smaller meat. We're taking off a limb, then we're making a smaller edit, and then we're doing finer work, whether you're julienne or chopping or dicing, and then going down to the scalpel where you're changing like ed to ing, or you want to change the word red to a different, more descriptive color, where you're verbing your nouns and nouning your verbs, so everything flows, and then you're done. So for me, it could be a day, it could be a couple days, it could be a week. This story Supplication took me a little bit because it's so dense and so weird, and I wanted to make sure not to repeat myself And so every time I do a scene, I'm like, okay, this is for setting, and this is for like the animals. This is for the flora. This is for the fauna. This is okay. I want more tension. So I had to make sure I wasn't repeating myself, and that it was constantly building up to a crescendo at the end. Right. I use Freytag's triangle and pyramid as my structure, which I'm sure you guys, if you don't know it, you probably are already using it. But basically, you're citing incident, narrative hook, exposition, internal, external conflict, rising tension, building to a climax, resolution, change, and denouement or denouement, epiphany, understanding of what has happened. And so that's kind of the structure I use. And so for me, when it's working, it flows. And when it doesn't, I have nothing. Like I don't have any fragments, any partially written short stories on my computer anywhere. It's either published or it's dead and gone. Because you mentioned ADD and everything, it bothers me. When I also like to work on one story at a time because I want to be in that world. I want to method write. I want to be that character. And I want to stay in that world, whether it's, the forest preserve down the road in 2024 or, Mars in the year 3000 or this puritanical witch story in Virginia in the 1400s. I want to stay with the people so I can channel it. And writing multiple stories. I don't write stories when I write a book either, which I think is why my books I tend to write in a month or so, because that's really, you get the ball rolling and like, okay, Monday I write scene, and then keep going and keep going and keep going and keep, that's a marathon, but it's all connected. So anyway, sorry, that was kind of a long answer, but
no, and so like each of you touched on, the fact that you have all these different short story markets, and you write for different publications, and you've obviously had success with getting your books published. One question that I get a lot, I used to author coach a fair chunk, but one question that I got a lot of the time was, is there any actual commercial viability to short story writing, short story markets, that kind of thing? And I tend to get very, very different answers from very different people. So I don't know if anyone wants to kind of pick that up and share their opinion on, because you obviously submitted to anthologies like this, which are amazing. And like, I've been in a few anthologies, which I feel are fantastic for, networking, meeting other people like this. I haven't personally made great money on short stories, but obviously you guys might have had different experiences.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't mind, I'll jump in first. I mean, maybe I published the most amount of short stories. I'm not sure how many, Christopher, you published, but having been doing this for 15 years, I guess, the veteran in the room. It depends on what your goals are. I think there's multiple goals for publishing stories. You want to connect with editors, you want to get attention, you want to get recognition, you want to get nominated for awards. Money is one variable in there, but even I wish pro rates were higher. I'm glad more and more people are paying closer to 10 cents a word. I really wish it was 20 or 25. I mean, heck, I wish it was $1. But 5 cents a word, 5 times 5, 250. Not a lot. I mean, it's a decent amount of money, but I mean, I think maybe in my best, maybe I think I had a year where I published like a dozen stories, but I don't think they probably aren't work for pro pay. You might be able to make, let's say you make 10 cents a word on a 5,000 word story and you get $500 and let's say you could do it a story a month. That's still going to be what, $6,000 a year? Or is that right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So it depends on what you want to do with it. I see it more as that $6,000 is nice, and if it's a side hustle, I can remember when I first started writing, putting money aside from short stories I sold and like advances on early books. Because I woke up at the age of 40, saw the movie Fight Club, took a bunch of classes, wrote a story, ended up getting in Shivers 6, Cemetery Dance, alongside Stephen King and Peter Straub, and that was my first breakout story. And then I just took classes, and then I got my master's degree. I can remember one day our AC unit in the backyard, stopped working. It was gonna be like $3,000 to get a new one. And I told my wife, I said, "Hey, I have that amount in my writer's account." She's like, "Really?" She was just kind of like, "You have fun, take your classes, write your stories, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm more than that." And so like it added up. It depends on if someone said, "Hey, here's a check for $6,000 for your side hustle," you'd say, "I'll take that check, thank you, I love it, that's great." Yeah. But if you're going to leave your full-time job to do it, not nearly enough, right? So I've had to work my whole career to get to the point where I can make as much writing, editing, and teaching as I did in advertising for 10 or 15 years. And part of that is from writing, but not all of it. So I think with short stories, you have to temper your expectations, but you also have to realize that short stories can then become a short story collection, and then that can be sold. Usually collections that are filled with stories that are all published, maybe you have one original. I finally got an advance on my last short story collection, so that was the first time that's happened to me. And then that's a second payday. And then short stories are also very easily adapted into movies because a picture is worth 1,000 words. It's easier to take a 5,000 word short story, turn it into a film, than to take a 80,000 word book and reduce it down to an hour and a half, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's so many different reasons we write short stories. Money's part of it, but all these other reasons, connecting with people, getting to know them, getting your work in front of people, getting some recognition, nominations and awards and whatnot, making a little money, connecting with editors, getting your name out there. All those things are all really why you should do it. And I think money's part of it. But if you think writing short stories is going to allow you to quit your day job, I would advise against it.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That's kind of how I look at it. I'd be doing it for free if I wasn't getting paid for it. But the way I look at it is, any money I make from my writing, it's going to be for fun. I use my writing money to buy a Nintendo Switch, and then I, buy games for that Switch, and then I play that with my kids. And so in a sense, it's kind of funding these experiences that I have. I used it to buy a VR headset, and a few years ago, that would never have been a thought in my mind. And the fact that I can do it now, it's all about redefining how you see success, I think.
Yeah.
Uh, success for me is writing the story, having something completed that I would like to read myself. And so getting paid for it is a bonus. That being said, I don't want to give the stories away for free. You also
You would, but you don't
you-
want to.
no, you want to value your art and everything, right? So so
For me, I'm just, I guess the first time I was published, I was just excited that somebody believed in me enough to pay me for my work or even for the distribution of my work, and to invest in me as a writer. And I get that feeling every time I get an acceptance now. I just think, really? Really? Someone's actually willing to pay me to do this, So that in itself is exciting to me because I spent so many years just wanting to be a published writer and just never, hiding, squirreling my stuff away in the wardrobe and never showing anybody. So, yeah, I love that side of it. It's not really the monetary value as it is the fact that somebody believes enough in me to invest in me, which is a
very
really cool
validating.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right on. And I didn't get paid for probably the first 20 or 30 stories I published. So I went through that too, and I worked my way up. I often wouldn't even send my work to the top places because I didn't think I was good enough, right? So I think all of our goals is a wide range of why we do it, and I think it's all valid. I just wanted my work to be someplace cool, right? And to be surrounded by other writers that I respected. And so I think what's nice now is that a lot of that aligns, where that some of my favorite writers, where they're publishing is where I want to be too. And if it happens to pay pro rates, like that's even better.
Yeah, that's so cool. I'm at the point where I'm sort of being quite selective with the anthologies that the open calls that I'm submitting to now, because I've been aiming for some sort of, ones where you've got maybe a 1% chance of getting in via the slush, and I've gotten into a couple of those. I was in one with you, Dan, Fear of
Yes.
Clown. So I was so stoked to get into that one. I
I was very
thought,
excited for that one as well.
yeah, I didn't think I had a chance to get into that one. And that's such a validating feeling when you shoot for the bigger ones and it comes off for you. So it's
Totally.
yeah, there's so many cool things about short stories, really, about writing
Yeah.
short stories. I
If
agree with what you
if
said earlier as well
sorry.
about the interaction with the other writers and about using that as a platform to get your name out there. It's all so true. It's it's actually a very good vehicle to use as an emerging author for sure.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
interesting about the validation, because every time I have a short story accepted, there's like a big part of my brain that says like, oh, they made a mistake. Oh, they just took it because they have to,
Fooled them.
Yeah, exactly. I was wondering, Richard, like you've been submitting and being accepted for so many years. Does that feeling ever go away, or is that something I got to live with?
No, it's always thrilling. And like I said, there's still a bunch of white whales that I haven't gotten into. I was just
Right.
thinking about my last short story collection, Spontaneous Human Combustion, was a finalist for the Bram Stoker Award. But that's the first time I'd ever been a finalist for that award for my own writing. My other one was for editing. And to be out of 64 collections that were recommended that year to make the top five. And though I didn't win, I'm going to believe I was number two, but well, even top five,
Yeah, that's huge.
that
That's
Yeah.
from the
huge.
community,
Amazing.
that felt like a lot of recognition, a lot of respect for all the hard work I'd put in. I
Yeah.
mean, I'll tell you the story that got into Lightspeed. Like I've been trying to get in there for 15 years. Like I said, I had to keep reading because I thought, did the word say not? Or like I'm looking for the rejection, right? Because you get the form, you get
Right.
so many form letters and they all say kind of the same thing. And thank you for submitting.
Mhm.
And, just isn't a good fit for us, whatever. And then I've been rejected by Lightspeed probably 15, 20 times over the last 15 years. And so I'm like, oh, there's
Yeah.
the rejection again. I'm like, oh, wait, what? So I had to look at- no, it always means a lot to me. And I get rejected all the time. I was just looking up some numbers for a thing I was doing at a local high school. And I think in 15 years, I had like 1,200 rejections. And then
Wow.
like 135 original stories published, like a total of like 175 if you include reprints. And every time, like even with this anthology, even being invited in, I'm like, oh crap! Like you want to prove that it was worth it, that they didn't make a mistake, right, by inviting you in. So you
Right.
bring your A game every time, right? And since I've been writing for a while, I have people who read my work, and so I can't phone it in. I've sent in work to anthologies I was invited into and then been rejected. I've also edited
Mhm.
anthologies where I invited people in and then had to turn them down.
Mm.
Big name writers
That's gotta be
too.
terrible.
Yeah. So the whole thing is it never changes. There are definitely days I still feel like an imposter, that I worry, especially if I take chances. So any story in mine that feels slightly unconventional, and that's probably everything I'm doing the last 3-4 years. Whenever I'm scared, I don't really workshop anymore, but I'll bounce it off a friend. Like Mercedes Yardley is a friend of mine, and I'll have her look at something. I'm like, does this work? Is this weird? Is this what I thought it was? I'm like, I have a handful of people that I really trust, but I still have those fears. I think all you can really do is if you figure out who you are and you write the stories based upon who you are and where you come from, and tell the stories that you have to tell, that you have the authority to tell, that you're equipped to tell. Like I lean into the maximalism. I don't have a lot of dialogue, not a lot of humor in my work. Do the things that your strengths, and if you just really give it your all, like I think you'll do great work. But it's hard to. It takes a lot of practice. You got to put in your 10,000 hours to really get to the place where you can even recognize your own work when it's working and when it's not. And when it's working, leave it alone. And when it's not working, be able to diagnose what's wrong with it and then fix it, have the ability to fix it. And it's also hard to aim for the top markets. If you're going to start off aiming to, submitting to the dark and nightmare and Clark's World and fantasy and science fiction and the Deadlands and Dark Matter, whatever, they're all like 1% acceptance rate or half a percent. You basically have to win a contest. You're 1 in 100, you're 1 in 200. I think the hardest thing for me is always trying to figure out what do those specific editors really want.
Yeah.
I had a conversation where I sat down with Ellen Datlow at StokerCon a couple of years ago, and it was really enlightening because I realized that her definition of horror was slightly different than mine. And some of the stuff that I had written that I thought was definitely horror, I don't think she didn't think was horror. She thought of it as dark fantasy. So at the top of every single publication, there is an editor there, a gatekeeper, one person who has to say yes or no. And it's often so subjective. It's John Joseph Adams, and it's it's everybody, whoever the editors are at the top. It's at the end of the day, and I myself editing Gamut magazine for 2 years and Dark House Press for like 3-4 years. At some point, there has to be one person to say yes or no. So it's so subjective, and it doesn't mean that your work isn't good. Doesn't mean your work isn't great. It just means today it's not going to be a yes, and it could be they just took 3 stories like it. It could be that they personally don't like vampire stories. It could be that they hate first person. Like there's so many reasons people say no that has nothing to do with the quality of the writing. So I encourage people to, if you feel comfortable, if you feel you're at the place that you think you can break in, start at the top and work your way down. It'll be slower. It'll be more painful, but you'll know deep in your heart that you took the shot. And, if you guys are in this anthology, then you're probably doing great work. There's no reason you can't break into any of the top markets.
Right. I feel like that's a good idea for like another podcast altogether, like taking these magazines and breaking down like what you think they want. Because I've done that for The Dark. I went through a bunch of their short stories and I'm like, okay, what are the ingredients for a cake that The Dark is gonna love? And I see I'm friends with Ai Zhang, and I see her, getting in all the
Yep,
time. I'm
yep,
like,
yep.
Ai, what are you doing? She's like, I don't know. They just like me. And so I'm
Dude,
like,
I
no.
totally agree with you on the dark. That one eludes me. I've gotten rejected so many times from them,
Oh
and I've
yeah.
talked to them, and I've had, they usually they kick you back in like a day or two, right? I
Yeah.
had
Or like,
then he was asking for like some reprints, and so I sent a bunch of stuff over. Like he had a story for like a week, and I'm like, oh, a week,
that's a long
Oh,
time. For the
and
dark, that's a
like
long time.
I'm like, are you still reading this? I think and he's like, we're definitely still reading it, and then the next day you rejected it, but
Yeah.
I wish I
Close.
could tell you what they wanted to, because
Yeah.
man, it's eluding me. And I have so many friends who publish there, and I'm like,
Mhm.
I think I write stuff that fits. Like, but whatever. Maybe they don't like maximalism, so I don't know.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah. But every time you do that, I find you have such a deliberate vision for the story that even if it doesn't get in, because I've done it for the dark, I've done
Yeah,
it for Nightmare, even
yeah,
if it doesn't get in, you have a story that you can be really proud of because you were
exactly,
so deliberate
exactly.
in the formation of it.
Yeah, and the nice thing that there might be, 40 markets out there that have pro pay. Maybe they're not all open right now, and then including not just magazines but websites and then anthologies and all this stuff. So if you write your story with the dark and nightmare in mind, that's good. Like you said, that's going to be a good story. And if it doesn't work for them, it could possibly work for one of the others. I just work my way
Oh,
down.
exactly.
I have a good list of
Yeah.
people where places I want to be, and as long as they're paying pro rates, I mean, there's certain white whales like my top five that are really the ones where I want to be. But beyond that, I just want to be someplace cool that alongside people I know that are writing. I feel like the quality around me is
mm,
good, and that the
yep.
cover art is great, and that the editors know what they're doing. I just want to be a part of that. So.
This turned
Take a
into a
shot.
shockingly optimistic and encouraging conversation of short stories. I've been part of quite a few conversations where it's been quite depressing, but like I think you guys have really captured the kind of like the wonder, the diversity, the range, the kind of spirit behind what short stories can bring. I am afraid that I'm going to have to start bringing us around to the end. But before we do go, I do have a question for each of you guys. If you would like to tell the audience where they can find out more about yourself and everything that you're working on. So, do you want to start?
Yes, you can find me on Blue Sky and Facebook, or go onto my website www.mstar.com.au.
Richard, how about yourself? Where can people find out more about yourself?
You can find me everywhere. I'm on all the social media platforms. I should probably get off of some of them, but I feel like there are too many people that are, on Facebook and Twitter, friends that I don't want to abandon them. So
I feel
you can
that.
find me
Yeah, for sure.
everywhere. My website's whatdoesnotKillme.com, based on the Nietzsche quote, not the Kelly Clarkson lyrics, but not that I dislike Kelly.
Or both.
Yeah, my latest work, my latest novel, Incarnate, the Arctic horror Sin Eater book, came out last September. That's my latest work. My last collection, Spontaneous Human Combustion, which came out 2 years ago, and that was a finalist for the Bram Stoker Award. I'll have new work coming out in Three Little Burning Eye this year. I have to write something for them, so I have to
Nice.
come up with an idea for that. And I'm still chewing on that one. And then hopefully a couple other stories out this year. Some things, they say they're going to come out in 2024, and then they get pushed to
Mhm.
2025, and then they get pushed into later in the year. So
Hmm.
we'll see what else comes out. And I'm currently shopping, my agent and I, my fifth short story collection called Under the Cover of Darkness. And so fingers crossed that can land with a big publisher. And yeah, you can find me anywhere. And if I can ever help anybody who's in the sound of my voice, with your writing career in any way, drop me a note, hit me on social media, come by my website, send me an email. I know, like Em was saying earlier, we do a lot of this alone, and it's tough, it's isolating, it's
Mhm.
creative, fun, but it's also, you feel very apart at times. So if I can help advise you or give you any tips or tricks or hints or anything, my column that was at Lit Reactor, which I wrote for 10 years, called Storyville, is still up there under Reedsy. I don't like Reedsy, but I haven't pulled it down yet, just because so many people reference it. So if you're looking for, I have a bunch of like 135 columns over there that cover a lot of things we're talking about, and it's free. So that's a great place, a great resource too. And beyond that, just just do the work. Take the time, read a lot, read the best of your
Mhm.
anthologies, read the places you want to be, and then just write the stories that you want to write. Be who you are. Don't try to. When I teach my students, I'm not trying to make them sound like me or Stephen King or Joyce Keller Oates or Shirley Jackson or Brian Evanson. Be you. Now, we all have our influences and the things we're doing, and we have comps and comparisons, but whatever you bring to the table, your point of view, where you live, your people, your culture, your experiences, your jobs, your relationships, all that. Put it in. That's what's going to make your werewolf story different than Daniel's versus Emma's versus Christopher's versus mine. We're all doing different things. So just be yourself and then let the chips fall where they may.
Beautifully put. And Christopher, how about yourself? Where can people find you?
Thanks, Daniel. I have a novel coming out, Pushing Daisy from Lethe Press. That should be out around April. I think we're going to be doing a cover release pretty soon, and which looks amazing. But in lieu of promoting myself, I kind of want to draw attention to an article written by Felix ID Demaro. He just wanted to detail his experience at DreadCon, and he's a Black author in Canada who experienced like a lot of kind of subtle racism, and I think it's an aspect of this industry that we really need to address head on. Just implementing that diversity from the editing choices all the way down. We need more BIPOC authors in the leadership roles, and we need to. I implore editors to actively search out these authors because if you read magazines like Correo or Faya, there are so many talented authors out there who are just putting out amazing stuff, and we can be contacting these people instead of relying on them to find their way to our slush piles. Even if they're not big names, even if they're not Tananarive Due or like Laird Barron, who are probably getting constant requests for stories. Even if they're smaller, more emerging authors, we can still be contacting them and getting work from them. And I think we should.
Right on.
Really, but
Right on.
absolutely. And I'll find that and I'll link that in the show notes so people can see that. And also, just for people listening on audio, everyone in the room was nodding at that point. So yeah, a point definitely well put. But we
Thanks.
are going to have to wrap up there, unfortunately. I do feel like there's potentially an individual podcast with each of you guys in the future because I feel like there's much more I want to dig into. But for now, we'll say a massive thank you to Michelle and the team for Eerie River Publishing putting together Earth Bleeds at Night and all the hard work that goes on over there. I implore people to read this collection. Obviously, we've got the stories from the amazing authors in this room, but there are so many other amazing stories in there as well. And for myself, there's nothing left to say other than a huge thanks to Em, to Richard, and to Christopher for joining me today. And a massive thank you to you, the listeners, as always, for tuning in. Find out more about all that's going on with the Other Stories podcast over at theotherstories.net. And I will see you next time when we strap our next willing victim into the writer's chair. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.